And welcome back to the Now Morning Show. It's now 19 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock on this Wednesday morning. Today we'll be continuing with our weekly segment, Positive Parenting, brought to you by the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, all month long, we will be bringing you engaging discussions with representatives from the authority who actually will be helping us get those useful tips and advice to help parents and guardians build healthy, positive relationships, all while keeping their children safe. Now remember, it truly takes a village to raise our children. And this morning we are tackling a topic that may still be a bit uncomfortable for some parents and guardians to have with their young children, but it is one that is critical if we are to protect them. Now it is My Body and Safety, and we have with us Mrs. Vandana Sivsanka Ali, the Assessment Manager at the Children's Authority, to tell us more. Good morning, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, and good morning to you and all our viewers.
Of course, thank you so much for joining us on Now.
It's my pleasure.
So, my body safety. When we think about my body safety as it relates to children, what are we thinking about?
This is such an important topic. And what we're talking about is empowering children with the information and the knowledge about their body and safety and the boundaries that should be observed. So it means teaching children about those parts of their body that are private and should not be touched by anyone outside of those persons that they may be comfortable with, such as their parents. And this is, of course, up until a particular age. And it's also teaching children that if anyone were to touch them in those places, who they should reach out to and who they should tell.
How early do you believe that parents should start having these conversations with their children?
Oh, we believe that as soon as children can speak and they have a sense of understanding, we should be empowering them in a manner that is child-friendly and developmentally appropriate. So as early as 2-3 years old, it's important to start teaching them the names of their body parts, and that which parts are private. That is, if you have a 3-year-old, for example, and, they're being helped to bathe or to shower, so, you may tell them that only mommy or daddy who is helping you can help you with these parts of your body, but no one else should be touching these body parts, So you want to speak to them in a manner that they can understand, and of course that evolves as they get older.
Of course. Now I know that sometimes parents would use euphemism to identify exactly the body parts. Do you advise that they do that, or should we call it what it is?
It's advisable that we teach children the correct terms for their body parts, so that when they hear it in other circles outside of the home, or if someone does something to them and they have to report it to somebody else, that they're using the correct terms. I recall reading a story at one point in time where a child actually made a disclosure to a teacher, but because she used the word cookie, the teacher did not recognize that she was actually making a sexual abuse disclosure. And it was only after she heard the child using the term in another context with her child, much later on, she realized what the child had been trying to tell her several months ago. So that's why we really encourage parents to teach children the correct words and the correct terms for their body parts.
Do you think this is still a taboo subject for parents to address? And is there any advice you can give parents who may be a bit uncomfortable discussing something like that with their children?
I think in some circles it's still taboo, and I think some parents still feel a bit uncomfortable. But I think that we are moving towards more open dialogue on this topic, and there is more openness to the importance of this topic. So I think that taboo is shifting a bit. And I would say, for parents, it's important to consider the consequences of not having that conversation. And I think that helps sometimes to make it a little easier to navigate that conversation when you think about the dangers of not necessarily empowering your children from an early age.
Do you think a conversation like this with a young child, let's say 3 or 4 years old, do you think it's going to be, let's say, scary for them to have this, kind of adult conversation with an adult?
I think how it's managed and how it's had is important in helping that child to feel comfortable. So, you want to be able to speak to the child in a way that they understand. You're using child-friendly language that they understand. You also want to, not necessarily use fair tactics, to say, well, this is what will happen if you don't. But while that's important, you also want to tell them why it's important to stay safe. So it's not just about, what will happen if you don't observe body safety, but also helping them to understand that it's important for their own body and to empower them with the skills, so that it's not about what somebody else can do to help them, but what they can do to help themselves.
Now, the story you mentioned before would have been about the child who was labeling, the private part as cookie. And so she would have been verbally expressing that she would have been being abused. But for a child who is afraid, because, adults often threaten them and tell them, don't tell or this will happen. And so for the children who are being abused, are there signs and symptoms that you can look for, that you can spot, okay, this child is being abused, I need to step in here?
Yes, there are some signs that we ensure that we inform the public about to be wary of. But I wanna preface that by saying that not any one sign is a definite indicator of child abuse, and it should be a holistic picture. And of course, once we see these things, you need to do further investigation. But these signs evolve as well as children go through different age groups. So for example, for young children, babies, toddlers, maybe up to the age of 4 or so, you want to look out for physical signs, redness, you may see discharges from the genital region. Those are things you want to look out for. You also want to look out for sexualized behaviors, for example, that would be unusual to see in a very young child. So a child engaging in self-stimulating behavior, or they're trying to exhibit that type of behavior on other persons or even their toys. And as the children grow older, let's say between the middle childhood age group, 6 to 10, 11 years old, you want to also look for changes in their behavior and their emotional presentation. So a child who perhaps is very outgoing suddenly becomes very withdrawn or very clingy. You see fearful behaviors when they're around particular persons, or avoidant behaviors around certain persons. And I want to just spend a moment to talk about that, because, in Trinidad and Tobago, we tend to say, well, come and give auntie a hug, or come and give uncle a hug, and you see children clamming up and they don't want to go near that person. And it's those little things that we need to pay attention to, and cue into. You may also see children starting to demonstrate difficulties in school. And that, together with the other signs, is something to pay attention to. As you look at older children in the teenage years, you may see some of those similar emotional and behavioral changes. But we tend to see in the teenage years self-harm and suicidal thoughts, and some of those more serious consequences coming out of the emotional distress. You may start to see those things. You may see pregnancy, of course, it's a telltale sign. You can't get pregnant without having had sex. So that's a sign to pay attention to. You also want to look at sexualized behaviors, or engaging in sexual contact with other persons of a similar age, even younger age, even older persons as well. So all of these come together, and we need to be aware of them, and we need to teach our children as well about them.
I know that somebody would have also mentioned, maybe if it is this child is, let's say, from a lower or middle class family, and all of a sudden they're bringing expensive cell phones to school and they're wearing expensive clothing, that may also be a sign of grooming, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So grooming is a little less understood and known. But yes, definitely perpetrators of sexual grooming sometimes may give gifts or things to help get the buy-in and the appreciation from the child, so that the child starts to trust them, and they start to get a likeness for them, so that makes it easier to be able to get towards the child, get closer to the child, and manifest any abusive behaviors.
Now, going back to having the conversation with the children, I know that we have some single fathers out there who would have girl children. How do we navigate that situation?
I always think that we should not approach the issue of fatherhood from the perspective that this is a difficult conversation to have, especially now. And as I said, we are evolving as we talk about positive parenting, and there are many fathers who are capable and willing to have that type of conversation with their children, sons and daughters. But naturally, it may be a little uncomfortable, especially if you're a first-time father as well, and a single father at that. So I would say, to empower you, again, understand the importance of why this is an important conversation to have. And if you don't have it, what is the danger? What is the consequence? You don't want somebody else informing your child or misinforming your child about it. So it's better that you have it. If that still remains uncomfortable, it's important to reach out to the persons who can help you have that conversation. So if there are other persons in your social circle, maybe if there's a grandmother or your sister, your father's sister, or a cousin, somebody that you trust who you can give that responsibility to, we encourage that. Of course, it must be somebody who you believe is responsible and you can trust to have that conversation. And also there are other professionals, so you can rely on persons within the school setting, your school's teachers, if there's sex education in school, so we say empower yourself, but also seek support where necessary.
And in terms of having the conversation with a female or male child, is there a difference in how you would approach the two, or is it one general thing you can tailor?
Yeah, I say it's one general thing, children are children,
Yes.
and you are their parent, and it's important to have that conversation regardless of that gender dynamic.
Of course. And finally, anything else you would like to add?
I'd just like to say that parenting is the most important job in the world. And so it's important as parents to honor that and to recognize this huge and awesome responsibility that we have towards our children and the importance of doing it right. And so we encourage parents to empower themselves with the information. If you don't have it or you feel you're not able to cope, please reach out to the resources. We have always talked about the Children's Authority as a resource that you can reach out for information. There's the National Family Services Division of the Ministry of Social Development. And then there are faith-based organizations, community-based organizations that provide this type of information. If you see something, say something. Child protection is everybody's business, and you started by saying it takes a village to raise a child, and that is so important. And of course, for more information, we can be reached at 996 or 800-2014. Information can also be found on our website at www.ttchildren.org.
And of course, we're seeing this flyer here. It's for the My Body Safety. Is it a series that you're doing, right? It's part of what you're doing here. So I'm seeing there's a flyer on the screen just providing some more information. I think it's also pointing to which body parts are important for parents to identify and label early on. Mr. Sanka Ali, you said from as early as toddler age, let's say 2-3 years old,
Yes.
we can start having these conversations, correct?
Yes.
And so that is just a flyer just showing exactly what parts we can identify. Remember, the Children's Authority will be with us every week, just giving us, some updates and tips on their parenting series. And I just want to thank Mrs. Sue Sanka Ali for coming with us and sharing, this portion of the positive parenting segment.
Thank you very much for having us.
Of course, thank you so much. I can't wait to see what we discuss next week.
Yes.
And that was Mrs. Vandana Sue Sanka Ali, who is from the Children's Authority, just sharing with us, how we can encourage our children and how we can have those conversations with our children to prevent incidences of child abuse. You're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a break and be right back. Stay with us.